How is everybody doing today, folks? My name is Daryl. If you've not met me before, so nice to meet you. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on Twitter. My handle there is opinionated. If you can spell it the way I spell it, you get 5 bogus points that are worth nothing, but you do get kudos and attaboy. So that's your, go look for it right now. Go Daryl Prell, Twitter. You'll find me, follow me. But more importantly, follow me on LinkedIn. The good content is on LinkedIn. The just me opining and being flippant and late at night being angry and telling people to get off my grass, that's on Twitter. So both have value, whatever you want. Today we're going to have a good conversation. You may have seen the invitation. It's all about the marriage of money in marketing. 5 tips for a successful union. So if you're in marketing, then you know all about the fact that we are only as successful as the budgets we are given. Can you relate to that? And it's up to us to make a good case for the budgets that we need. And it seems like we're always at the mercy of the CFO or the CEO, or even sometimes the board that said, where we go to them and we say, please, sir, can I have some money? And they come back to you and they say, nay, you need to go hit this impossible number that's based on nothing other than the shareholder value we shall return and my personal retirement plan, my 401k, whatever it might be, that I need you to hit. And then we bitch and moan, and that's the way it goes. And then about a quarter in, when things maybe aren't going well, they come back and they say, what have we got for our money? We don't think you're doing a great job. And that's why you'll ultimately find that the average tenure of a CMO is less than 2 years, because either we get tired of defending the budget we're given, or they get tired of thinking we're going to give them an ROI. And said another way, often it ends in divorce. And hence what we want to have is a good marriage of money and marketing. And to do all that, there's lots of different tips and tricks and techniques. Now, if you are early on in your career, if you don't have a lot of budget, maybe you're a social media manager, maybe you're a digital marketer, you maybe have some ad budget, and you're always thinking you don't have enough, but you don't understand how the whole process works. My guests and I today are going to talk to you and explain to you how the whole process works, number one. Number two, if you're a veteran leader and you're wishing you just had more money, or you're just frustrated to all lengths of the world on how it's like, the CFO and the CMO are like men and women on that famous book, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. And there's some truth in that. And so what we want you to do today is we want to come back to you using more mixed metaphors with the 5 love languages that you need to be successful and get those money, and to show them how it was a good ROI for all involved. So it's all about a successful union. That's it. Now, we're live, which means you need to go and participate in the conversation. You and I both know that you can't, I can't hear you, my guest can't hear you, but the real action, as we all know, takes place in the chat. The best action takes place in the chat. So go to the chat now. Give a shout out. Myself, I'm in Ottawa, Canada. Saves me typing it. My staff and I will be online. When I can, I'll be talking, but I'm also here talking. So it's complex, all these different channels to communicate with you. But go there. If you don't agree with what we're saying, put it in the chat. If you have a question, put it in the chat. If you have an opinion on who's going to win the NHL or the NBA finals, put it in the chat. I don't care. That's the plan. It's all in the chat. With that said, let me introduce to you my co-host today, who I was just sharing before I brought him on, that normally I stand. I have a standing desk, and I stand because I have energy. Normally I stand, but today I'm sitting. I'm sitting a whole different camera angle if you watch our webinars on a regular basis, because this is going to be a chill conversation. I'm not going to be totally freaking out and waving my arms everywhere, although I have this problem now, as you can see. So we're going to do our best to have a fun conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, people all around the world, put your hands together for my good friend, Mr. Mark Killens, the CMO of Airmeet. Mark, welcome to the show, my friend.
It's great to be here. I am fired up. That was a quite the way to kick it off, Daryl, to say the least.
It's all about waking them up. That's what it's like. You got to be in their face and be loud. It's kind of like kids, for all you young parents out there, when the kids start screaming, no matter what you're doing, you drop everything, go running, because what's all the excitement about, right? So yeah, that's what you do. All right, Mark, I promised the crew this would be a casual conversation. So let's just start one CMO to another. Have you ever had problems getting money, or do they just give you exactly what you want? Just kind of curious. Maybe you can teach me a
I,
little.
that's it's such an easy question. I laugh because it's like problems getting money. Like, I mean, and actually, in the defense of executives and heads of finance, and whatnot, I actually think that's a good thing. There should be friction. They should push back. There should be checks and balances. So I'm going to say that, Daryl, to start with.
So look at him out of the gate being contrarian. Okay, so let's explore that. Let's have some fun here. Why do you think there should be checks and balances? Let's just go down that road.
So I learned this way of thinking from my time at HubSpot, and Dharmesh, I think, was the creator of it. And it's like these 4 ways to think about value. The first thing that a marketer should optimize for is customer value. Always, like, if you're going to make an investment, how does that help the customers in the short or long run? Then it's enterprise value, so total business value. Then it's team value, so then it's your marketing team. And then it's you value, like your value. A lot of people think like in the inverse, or they think like team first or you first, and they don't forget about the enterprise or the business and the customer. So it's like, I think a good CFO actually thinks like that. If they don't, then there could be problems and I get kind of frustrated. But if you're aligned philosophically, and that's where I would always start with these budget conversations. What is your philosophical approach to how you think about value creation, how you think about managing money, how you want to understand what's going on within marketing? Is it weekly, monthly, quarterly? How much budget transparency do you want? Do you not want? And I can get, I'm sure we can get pretty tactical with this conversation. I do think, though, the philosophical belief that's shared across those key individuals is a very important conversation to have.
Okay, did you hear what he just said there, folks? He said a lot, but I'm gonna cherry pick because I heard certain things and I loved it. He said, "Are you aligned philosophically?" He talked about the 4 levels, right? He said customer value, then enterprise value, then team value, and then the U value, capital Y. And I was writing like a madman to make sure I captured all that. He said a whole bunch of stuff. I couldn't type that fast. I'm old. But he talked about how do you define value. In other words, what was really interesting here was Mark didn't make it about marketing having money. He made it first and foremost about the customer. Then he went to the enterprise. And this is something that most people don't understand. And we can go to the team and the U aspect in a bit, but that 1-2 punch really resonates with me. What does the customer want? What does the enterprise want? So on the enterprise side, where I'll start with, and Mark can maybe speak more to the customer side, is I always look at, what are the corporate goals, right? Are the goals to grow a certain percentage, or the goals to gain market share, or the goals to reduce churn, etc. You need to understand the goals, because whatever budget requests you put forward need to support the value or the goals that you're trying to achieve and deliver. And if they don't, then you're already misaligned, which is what he was saying. He said, are you aligned philosophically? So if you want to have a happy marriage when it comes to the corporate world, you've got to be aligned with all those sitting around the executive leadership table, because there's shared goals. We just do it different ways. Marketing is a one way, support, customer success, sales, they do it complementary ways, all around that aligned philosophy. Did I say that right, Mark, or do you need to correct me? And by the way, please correct me.
No, that's correct. Let's go now a little bit deeper. Then the next place I go to understand how I should be spending money is right to, like you were saying, the revenue plan, the sales plan, the motion around sales. So if you think about like a pie chart and you think about all these places you can invest, and I'm not talking like really strategic not very tactical investments, like, oh, how much I'm going to pay on paid social, or how much I'm going to spend on content syndication, or all these different like tactical things. I'm first thinking about how do we bring in sales today, and how does that need to change? And is it, first off, like mostly new versus expansion within the install base? Is it 50-50? Then like you think about the new business, how efficient are we doing at outbound versus inbound? If you think about inbound, let's double click into that funnel. Let's double click into the outbound funnel. Where are there points where we're maybe not as efficient? And I think of our overall marketing in 4 flavors. I think of it as volume, velocity, conversion rates, and value. So what's the volume coming in at different stages of the funnel for both marketing and sales? What's the velocity? How fast are things moving through the funnel? at what efficiency are they moving through the funnel, which is conversion rates, and then what's the value, especially once it gets to like opportunity created, in exchange for how much it costs us to create that opportunity, as just an example. So you think about those four things and you have a good sense of those metrics and numbers and you're tracking them every week, we do weekly pacing, you can start to like attribute marketing dollars spent to different points, right? And like, you know, it's very different, Daryl, if your business is 50-50 inbound versus outbound versus like 80%, 90% inbound versus 10-20% outbound, right? The way you would allocate, you know, expense and what you would do with that budget is definitely different. And it's also very applicable to the growth goals of the company as well. Like you were saying, like how fast do you want to grow versus not grow? Like there's just, say it simply, there's a lot to go into it, but the more handle you have on your metrics, and if you think about them in those four buckets, the more I think successful you'll be.
Ooh, I'm writing this one. The more handle you have on your metrics, the more successful you will be. Now, if I had a mechanical keyboard, folks, you would have heard that massive clicking away. As it is, I was still typing loudly. Okay, so there's so much to unpack of what Mark just said here, but I want to start off. I want to start off with this one. If many of you right now, many of your marketers right now are thinking, you know what, this webinar isn't what I thought it was. I'm going to bounce. Don't. And this is really, really important. Notice what Mark and I have not talked about, not once during this entire conversation. We haven't talked about event-led marketing, which, by the way, is a category that Aramid is all behind, as an example. It's a category. We haven't talked about social media marketing or social media as a channel, which, of course, is something that Agorapulse cares about. We haven't talked about what are the latest subject line clickbait formulas that work to increase your open rate. We haven't talked about industry benchmarks on email and how we're performing. We haven't talked about ChatGPT and the impact it's had on how we go to market. We haven't talked about any of that. What we talked about is and he's laughing because he knows exactly what we're talking about. What we're talking about here is what marketers talk about at the leadership table. So let's repeat. He talked about what's the revenue plan, what's the sales plan and sales motion. I want to stop there for a second right away. All right. So is it new versus expansion? Why does he ask that? He asked that because our strategies change if it's new versus expansion. Is it inbound versus outbound? Why does he ask that? Do they expect 100% to be inbound or is it outbound? If it's outbound, am I going to do something like maybe an ABM motion to support that or not? That all depends on my average selling price and what my average lifetime value is and what my churn is. And there's so many, and what are my budgets for ad spend, and does that make sense? All of these, what does he talk about? Volume, velocity, conversion rates, and value. And then he talked about measuring it weekly, and he talked about attributing marketing dollars spent to the different points in the wholesales and buyer's journey. So all of this is how marketers think. I was not taught this when I was coming up through the ranks. Mark, curious, were you ever taken aside by a CFO and said, Mark, let me teach you the ways of the financial world so that you will be a kick-ass CMO one day? Did that ever happen?
I mean, I think the most important thing that marketers should understand, Daryl, is how does the business create revenue and retain that revenue? Fundamentally, that's like the business. That's a business. That's like, how do you create new revenue? How do you retain revenue? You study that and you kind of boil all of this stuff down to like first principle thinking, if you will. Then you can start to kind of unpack all of these questions around like, well, what should my CPM be? Or like, what should I, how many leads do I need? Or, who am I going after? Like, and actually the who am I going after is actually probably more of the strategic question as well that we haven't talked about yet, which is like on the ideal customer profile, quality over quantity. I definitely think less is more these days in marketing. So when you think about just like the fundamentals of the business, the first thing I'd go to if I'm a new CMO or a head of marketing, or even just like someone that reports into a CMO, I'm asking myself, how am I contributing to both those things or one of those things?
This conversation we're having here, folks, is the conversation you need to have with the stakeholders who control the budget. You need to ask all of these questions: customer value, enterprise value, team value. What do you expect from me and my value? What's the revenue plan? What are we prioritizing? Sales plan, sales motion, volume, velocity, conversion rates, value, all of this stuff. This dialogue is how the money conversation, like in every marriage, which can be full of conflict, happens successfully in corporate America, corporate Europe, corporate world. Call it what you will. If you can have that conversation, as opposed to leading with, this is a really cool ad, and I think it's going to bring in a whole bunch of leads, then you're going to be totally respected, and they're going to feel like you're aligned and you get it. And they're actually going to trust you enough to, once you have that alignment and you can prove how you're supporting the vision and the corporate goals, they're going to trust you as a CMO or as a marketing leader to spend the money, to invest the money accordingly. But the big thing is, I want to circle this back one thing further. Remember what Mark said was, he said, the more handle you have in your metrics, the more successful you will be. And what that really means is that you need to monitor what you're doing so you can tie the results back to those top level goals. We said the goal was to prioritize expansion over customer acquisition, or we said the goal was to have quality over quantity, right? So yes, maybe the lead volume we have in this year is less than the lead volume we had last year. People panic. But look at the conversion rate, and the actual deal size is substantially higher, which is what we wanted to have. All right. So those are the conversations and the metrics are what do that. And you go back and you report that back to the CFO and all the other stakeholders, the investors, the CEO, whomever it might be, and they will love you. What did I miss there, Mark? Did I get that right? Am I encapsulating the elements of what you're saying? Because you're going really deep, and I want to make sure I haven't missed anything.
No, it's a spot on. And what you could do, if say you're like an individual contributor, manager, director on a marketing team, you could approach this the other way too. Like, hey, I have this idea for this more tactical thing. Let me just make sure I report on the leading and lagging metrics of that tactical thing. So the thing could be, hey, I want to create this new free tool. And I think this free tool is going to help us increase the lead quality. And then I want to track that new free tool all the way through to the number of meetings we book from it and pipeline, and then even to revenue, right? But if you do that over say 3 months and you show the full picture, it's like, whoa, now you're showing to people you actually understand how this free tool has helped with the team's value, the business's enterprise value, and the customer value. And you're going to earn respect and trust so much faster. You can do it the other way too, by asking for those things and having a conversation up front as well. Sometimes though, you might want to do both, but other times you just start with doing the thing and then doing it though to the level in which the leaders expect you to kind of, or would expect, maybe they don't expect, but would expect for that conversation to be elevated to. And that will then, get you a seat at the table, if you will.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you to put your marketing mentorship hat on for a moment. If the audience today listening to this is not a senior marketer, they're not a VP of marketing, they're not a CMO, and maybe they're a first-time director, and they're realizing they need to have better understanding of their finances and how to engage with the executives and all these aspects we're talking about. What's the best way, in your experience, whether it was your own personal story and how you did it, or how you mentor your employees today and in the past, to acquire those skills? That's my first part. So how do I learn those skills? Second part, I maybe have never had a conversation with our CFO before. The CFO scares the hell out of me. How do I approach them and be credible and have this conversation, knowing that I'm not comfortable having this conversation? I'm still getting used to this.
The first question, I would be asking. So when I joined HubSpot and I got to director, I started to ask questions around hey, I kind of want to understand the budget better. How do we think about budget? Is it monthly? Is it quarterly? Walk me through the budget. And actually, I think a marketing budget is pretty simple. The way that we do it, and the way I did it at Drift as well, is you do quarterly budget planning and you have a plan, a forecast, and actuals. Actuals are filled in every month. Plan is done no later than 1 week after the quarter begins. Usually right when the quarter begins, the plan column is locked. You can't change the plan numbers because this is what you're planning to spend in the quarter. And actuals are the actuals that come in throughout the quarter. And the actuals you want to update as soon as you understand, are you going to be above or below budget for this thing? So then you can either reallocate money to other line items in the budget, right? And then I meant the forecast. The forecast you want to do in real time because the forecast might change according to the plan. The actuals are done every month. I apologize. So you got those three things. So the reason I say that is you basically want to understand how does the business like manage money, and the most important thing to learn is cash is not accounting. That might not make a total amount of sense. It might not be perfectly said, but when you pay for something is not when you account for it in marketing typically. Sometimes it is, but it's not always the case. So for example, you buy a new piece of software and it's $12,000 for the year and you pay it up front, $12,000. Guess what? In your budget, that's going to be accounted for or accrued every month. So $1,000 a month. So like knowing those intricacies and understanding like, hey, how does actually things get planned, forecast, tracked, accounted for? So basically kind of studying accounting a little bit is where I would begin, and like find someone on the team. Could be your CMO, could be someone else. It could even be what I've also done in the past, especially at HubSpot, is I worked with someone more junior in the finance team. And they taught me these things. You don't have to go to the CFO. You can go to someone a little bit more junior who reports to it, right? CFO is probably not managing the forecasts and actuals for the marketing budget. It's probably someone else. And you're just trying to like understand how the revenue machine works, right? Like the P&L, if you will, right? Like, at the end of the day, like you're trying to understand the CAC, the cost of acquiring a customer, in the context of what you're responsible for. And sometimes for a lot of marketers, like that won't be a direct line, right? Like for demand gen people, Daryl, it's pretty straightforward, right? But for others, it might be a little more nuanced. You might have to consider contractors. You might have to consider software. You might have to consider a few other things. And you might have to consider the total cost of something as well, especially from a demand gen standpoint. Like how much did it cost to produce it? What's the employee headcount costs? What's the channel, activation costs, right? So the more you can just kind of like study the system being the accounting side of marketing, the sooner you can get to understanding it. And then if you understand it, the sooner you can get to changing it. But if you try to change it before you understand it, and you try to like understand it before you study it, you're going to run into issues. So I think just being patient and spending time with people both within finance and marketing that aren't the senior leaders but who understand it can be super helpful.
There's so much in what Mark just said that mirrors my own journey. I had the sum total of my finance background, because I'm a computer developer. I'm a computer programmer by education. That was how I came up, right? And ironically, we did a lot of systems analysis in that day. Like you're going to spec out a piece of software, and part of that was we had to take an accounting course to make sure we understood basically how basic finance worked. Because I would use that someday when I'm doing my systems analysis, because everything goes back to money. That was it. Sum total of my finance background. I did exactly what Mark talked about. Now, if you're in a startup, you can go to your head of finance. If you're in a bigger company, exactly what Mark said, you can go to someone a little lower on the totem pole. And this is what I said. Mark's words were identical to mine. He basically said, walk me through or help me understand. And I have vivid memories of this, walking into their office the first time I did this. And I did this at every single company since. Best relationship exercise ever to get to know your head of finance. You walk into their office, you shut the door, and you say, okay, I'm just going to be transparent and vulnerable for a second. I don't understand everything the hell's going on. Can you just walk me through how this works? And you know what? You're thinking to yourself, oh my gosh, they're going to realize I'm an imposter. They're going to realize I don't know what the hell I'm doing. They're going to get rid of me. In fact, it's the complete opposite. Every finance person I've ever met, when I do this to, they just kind of go, and they smile, and they're like, absolutely. You know why? Because they want a relationship with you. They don't want conflict. They know they're going to work with you the most. All the other teams are people costs or asset costs. That's it. Marketing has got the program spend, the campaign spend, and they don't want to have a volatile relationship with you. They want to have a good relationship. So doing that. The next thing I would say is never be afraid to ask questions. Like talk constantly with your finance representatives. Ask questions on a weekly basis. I'm going back to my finance people and saying, "Hey, can we just tweak the budget? This formula or that column or what have you, that, or can I have a separate spreadsheet that does this analysis?" And I never once get any attitude. They're like, "Absolutely." You know why? Because a couple things this does. This tells them that I'm looking at my numbers, I'm studying it. It says that subtly. Number two, it says that I want to work with them collaboratively and they want to support me, that they're a service function. That's their whole function in life in the organization. The next thing you can do is you can set expectations. So I do this. I did this again last week. I said, "Hey, listen, you're going to get an invoice shortly you didn't know about." Tell me if you've ever done this, Mark. You're going to get an invoice. It's for like $40,000 and it wasn't on the plan. Not to worry.
Yeah.
I have canceled this forecasted spend that's 3 months out, what have you, and I've moved it forward 60 days, still within the quarter. Life is good. Don't worry. I got payment terms, net 60 or something, so you're fine that way. And I've just moved stuff and took it out of this cost center and moved it into this cost center. But don't worry, it's still going to fit within the overall budget. You know what they say to me? They say, "Okay." You know why? Because I'm talking to them, I'm anticipating their questions, and then I get buy-in. Those are some of the simplest things you do. Finance people actually aren't scary once you understand how they speak and what their vocabulary is and how they are measured. They're measured. Remember, their job in life is to make sure we don't spend money we don't have. That's their job in life, number one. Number two, their job is to make sure that we're spending money wisely. So, for example, simple thing. If the customer acquisition cost is $100, but the industry average is $50, that's an expensive customer acquisition cost. We should maybe look at that. They would raise that, and say, "What's going on here?" Maybe marketing is not spending correctly. Maybe it's another reason. They're not bad boys and girls. They're just the stewards of the money. That's what I've learned. Mark, any reactions as I share that with you, Mark? Can you relate to that?
No, definitely. You want to be very over communicate all day, every day with your finance team. That's a takeaway that I think I just heard from you. And I agree with that 100%.
Yeah. Have you ever not been over communicative, maybe in your earlier years as a marketing savant?
Yeah, no, I think you definitely, absolutely. It's just a matter of, reps and sets, experience. I think with almost anything in business and life, it's about like sharing is caring. So if you're going to be under budget, tell them as well. Like, don't I have a very tactical thing is like having a monthly finance check-in once a month minimum.
Yep.
Minimum.
Yep. Same thing. We meet with my CFO and I and her director of finance. The three of us meet once a month, often more, but I'm talking to them every day almost on Slack, nonstop. And it's just keeping those lines open. So a couple of things we talked about. There would be 5 takeaways here, folks. All right. We haven't done the number 1, number 2, number 3. So let's just kind of recap. Number 1, the first thing we basically talked about was aligning your marketing goals with your organization's financial objectives. That was back when, what is it? What is our revenue plan? What's the sales plan in motion? What are our financial objectives? Was it new customers? Was it expansion? Was it inbound versus outbound? Whatever that was. That's number 1. Get alignment. All right. So if you weren't following along, that was number 1. Number 2 was collaborate a shared set of goals that maximizes efficiency and drives revenue growth. That goes back to the metrics. The shared set of goals are basically what we're going to measure. Right. So you really want to make sure that you have alignment, not just with your CFO, but with the executive leadership team. Because here's one of the things, again, you may not understand is even though I, as a CMO, am responsible for marketing, at the leadership table, I still have input on how my other peers are doing in their organizations. I'm not going to tell them how to do their job, but I am an officer of the company, and it's my job to say, our churn is looking really high. What's the plan? Can we help you? But we need to fix, but net is you need to fix the churn there, buddy. Just like they will have insights on me. And the best way to manage that, of course, is with a shared set of metrics. Curious, Mark, on that one. Do you folks use a system like OKRs or enterprise operating system or entrepreneurial operating system, EOS, or other tools at Airmeet?
We use V2 Moms,
Okay.
Salesforce. So I use them at HubSpot. HubSpot called them M spots: mission,
Yep.
strategy, plays, omissions, targets. We use V2 Moms at Drift. I was a very big advocate to bring them into Drift because they were so successful at HubSpot. And then I brought them into Airmeet. We have V2 Moms plus weekly pacing. Every single person on my team has metrics that they can track on a weekly basis. Some are monthly because more product marketings
Yep.
are a little bit monthly, but every team meeting, people are sharing what they've learned from their pacing, what they're doing, how they're working together. We show it to the CEO. Everyone knows where we are. So like sunlight, when it comes to metrics, they say sunlight is the best disinfectant. Sunlight is the best thing to help you create a strong partnership with your finance team and just the head of the company. And I think V2 Moms, vision, values, methods, obstacles, or omissions, and metrics, critical. I like those better than OKRs personally. And we use like Asana for everything else. And actually, our budgeting, we used a really interesting tool at Drift called, of course, I just forgot the name of it. It was an actually marketing budget tool. It was really good. It integrated with Marketo and a few others, so it could help you attribute ROI. Geez, why can't I remember the name now? But we just use a spreadsheet, a Google sheet at Airmeets. You got to have something at least like that, and every quarter I have a new tab in that sheet. And actually not every quarter, but at least once a year I do zero-based budgeting as well. I mean, you do a tops down and a bottoms up sales plan typically, right? And see where they converge. But I like to do once a year, like basically zero-based budgeting, Daryl, because and that's basically wiping out everything in your budget and starting straight from scratch. Like no like nothing's carried over from quarter to quarter or like year to year. It's become a bigger thing to do these days.
So what you're hearing here, folks, is we have both of us. They may be different, but we have frameworks that guide the entire company, the principles and values and everything else are a big part of that. So at Agorapulse, we used to use OKRs. Now we use EOS, the entrepreneurial operating system. It's based on a book you can read called Friction. But either way, it's exactly what Mark is talking about. It's an alignment around what are the KPIs and EOS with the idea, what are the big rocks, in OKRs, maybe what are the objectives, and then the key results, etc. And then we also have weekly pacing. And then we use a tool called 90. You can use there's different tools, 90.io, which is an EOS tool that allows all the stakeholders to physically see all the weekly pacing and everything else. And I like that because that brings us to point number 3, which was the whole idea. I'm getting this right here. 1, 2, 3, which Mark used the term sunlight is the best disinfectant. Okay, so point number 3 is the idea of fostering a culture of mutual respect. So between you and the finance and the other stakeholders, right? You both have a job to do, and cross-functional collaboration. So that's sunlight, making everything transparent, putting it out there to see. That will scare so many of you because you're thinking to yourself, ooh, some of my programs aren't doing that well. I'm really not inclined to share that. I would rather wait until I have a little more time and hopefully I get an uptick on the leads coming in or the conversions or whatever it might be or the revenue generated, and then I'll share and it'll be ta-da. No, that's bad. That's bad. Don't do that. Don't do that.
That's bad.
Don't do that. That's bad. Oh, and if you see us laughing, it's because I can't speak for Mark, but I'm pretty confident I'm speaking for Mark. I'm speaking for me, though. I've done that. And then what happens is it bites you in the ass every single time. So remember, we talked about controlling the conversation, setting expectations. So a big part of setting expectations for me is saying, hey, proactively take a look at this number. It's not trending well. We are aware. We have a plan. Here it is. The CFO and those who control the purse strings or authority in the company, like a CEO, as long as you recognize it and you're proactive and it makes sense and it's plausible, they will let you do your thing because they're just they know you're accountable. Ultimately, you have to say, yes, it worked or no, it didn't. But sunlight, best disinfectant. Did you make any of those mistakes when you were earlier in your career, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to the point around over communication. So it's like you said, transparency, and I mean, some of this is in the culture of the company. So like you can be influenced by the culture of the company too. Like, is it okay to kind of fail or make a mistake, or like what's the what would a repercussion be there potentially? Like, I don't know. It's like, so I do think some of these things are heavily influenced maybe by also your manager, of course, right? So there's, but you know, for me, it goes back to just data. Like, you know, data is usually very objective, and it doesn't, you know, lie typically. You can't really bend it too much. So use data as part of your story. Like it's yeah.
The beauty of data, it's kind of like the universal translator if you're a Star Trek fan, right? Because you can speak marketing, you can speak finance, and each side's going, I don't know what the hell you're saying. It's not what I speak. It's not my language. But data is that universal. Oh, okay. Yeah, okay. Boom, got it. It's what brings you together, which brings us to point number 4. You want to bridge the gap between marketing and finance. And why we bring this up is it's been my experience, Mark, would love to hear your thoughts on this, that on almost every single job I've started, that there has been a legacy where my predecessors did not have a good rapport with finance. And because of that, the finance people, you know, because we're all human, we all have hurts, hangups, habits, biases. They just assume that marketing is stupid because they've been burned. So it's not that they're intentionally trying to be malicious and anti-marketing. They've been burned by bad marketers who didn't do what we're talking about here. It's your job to then overcome that, to bridge that gap. Mark, have you ever gone into an organization where you've had to kind of reprogram the relationship and overcome the sins of your predecessors?
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So one really tactical tip I'll give on this one is I'm almost always going to have 5 to 10% reserved out of my budget, either as like a CMO line item at like the discretion of the CMO,
Yep.
or just purposely holding it back because I never want to be over budget, like ever. Like,
Yep.
you know, at first time CMO, like, you know, quarter 1 and quarter 2, even like quarter 3, even for the first year, if you can always be at budget or under budget while still like hitting, you know, 100% of your targets or close to it, not even 100%, close to the targets, it's going to be great. But if you're always over budget a bit, or like, you know, over budget a lot by 1 quarter, or whatever, like trust starts to go down quickly. So I'm always trying to like play with the numbers, and like, you know, between like my 3 buckets of like people costs, software costs, and programmatic costs. That's how I just think about my budget at the highest of levels. I'm trying to always have some slack in that, so I'm never over budget.
And even if to your point, when I went through this again just last week, where I had made a comment and I said, now, as you can see, we're going to be, I think it was like $10,000 over on one line item, which in big picture, by the way, folks, to a finance person, that's like nothing. All right. But to you and I, we're like $10,000. And I said, now, just so you know, this is the timing, there's the plan. So by next quarter, that deficit will be erased and we'll be back in the green, and it's all good. And they were like, okay. That was just overcoming the gap, because I know they're worried about having to report that. But as long as they've got an answer to say, but don't worry, we've already got a plan, they're good. For me, what I've done to overcome the gap over and over again is early on when I'm starting a job, very early on, or if you're in a new role, you've just been promoted perhaps, or given a broader mandate. You walk into your counterpart, head of finance, or someone that you have a relationship with there, and you say, what do you need from me? What do I need to do to make your life easy? What do you wish my predecessor would have done? And then shut up. And it's amazing. They may say, well, I need you to do A, B, and C. And maybe you can't do A, B, and C, but you can say, listen, I can't do A, B, and C. I will try to do A, B, and C, but I'll definitely do A and B. If I do A and B, is that a reasonable compromise? Well, that would be way better than what before. Okay, great. And then you periodically update. I haven't forgotten. Here's what's going on A, or here's what's going on B. And you just keep on bringing it up occasionally so they know that you're consciously trying to do that. And what that does is establishes trust. And you want that trust, because the day is going to come when you are going to be over budget or you are going to make a mistake. And you don't want them being the one who rats you out. You want them being the one who comes to you and say, hey, Daryl, heads up. You might want to deal with this before I have to report it. And I see you nodding your head there, Mark. Have you been in those situations before?
Yeah, I mean, the way I have always seen a budget done is like you got to spend it in the quarter or you lose the money, right? Like if you don't spend all your budget in the quarter, you lose it. So keep that in mind. I just feel like when it comes to getting on good terms with the head of finance and just the overall finance team and the CEO, asking questions like you said, how help me understand what has worked or what hasn't worked, and help me understand where you don't understand if things are working. Like, because if you can show to them, like, here's how I will help you understand and make sure you understand that these things that are happening in the business are either being done well or not well, from again a pure numbers standpoint, which is like the universal language of people in business, then that's going to earn you some really quick credibility as well. And I was able to do that a few times. Like, no, like here's the evidence that you were looking for around, like, yeah, we shouldn't be spending this much money in ads, or like, no, we should actually spend more money because we're leaving money on the table.
All right. So final lessons. Tip number 5. This is what we call the wild card round. Tip number 5. Mark, any piece of advice that we've not covered yet that will achieve the goal of physically driving a happy marriage between those who hold the funds and people like us, marketing, who spend the funds. What tip can you give for a successful union?
Yeah, so I mean, one thing we didn't talk about, which is actually the ultimate, like, I would say the ultimate, like, especially in venture-backed companies, the ultimate holder of the cash is the board. But that probably is a whole other webinar. Yep. So board management when it comes to finances and budgets is very interesting. A tactical thing that you can do that actually the AirMeet board loves, and actually everyone on the AirMeet team loves. We have a whole like deck now of customer journeys that we do once a week. Instead of like just looking at the numbers, show the journey of a customer and all the marketing and sales touch points that went into them becoming a customer or expanding, and contextualize the data. So like, this is just a great way to train the team on like the impact they have day to day. You don't show all of the touch points, show the key ones, but you get so much information by looking at what happened between marketing, sales, and even CS to make that customer successful. And you can say, well, yeah, we spent that money. There was money spent. That was sourced. That was influenced. Wow, it makes so much more sense. Like, let's find more of those. Like, build out these one slide customer journeys. And I'm telling you, people will probably love them.
And not only is that great for the board and building on what Mark said, that's also great for all the others, the rest of the company. So that's something that I would share the board. Once the board said it was awesome, then in my next all staff meeting, I would say, hey, let me show you this one slide that I just showed the board and walk them through it. Because you'd be amazed how many people in the rest of the organization have no idea what you do in marketing. They think you just spend money and you just make cool videos. He's laughing.
No. I share one of those a week. So I do another tactical thing where I don't talk too much about money, Daryl, but I call it the Monday Marketing Minute. In about 1 to 2 minutes, you can get a download on all things marketing that happened the week before, and that's coming up in the next 1 to 2 weeks. Monday Marketing Minute, I send it out in the global company Slack channel and by email to the entire team, and I talk about at least one journey typically a week in those as well.
So another perfect example of just over communicating, and you're doing that because you really, if he's putting sunlight on it, is what he's doing. It's exactly what he's doing. All right, because
the sunlight.
What happens when you don't do what he just shared with you is that people start, in the absence of information, they just start making shit up, and they just, and usually it's not to your benefit. Let me tell you that one. The last tip I'll give you, this is our 5th, here we're talking about board management and marketing minutes, is get to know your acronyms if you don't know them already. And there's 1,000 of them out there, right? So whether it be, you heard Mark talk about CAC, customer acquisition costs. You've heard me talk about LTV, long-term value. It could be, we talk about churn. It could be burn rate. It could be ARPA, average revenue per account. It could be MRR. It could be ARR. The list goes on. If you understand those acronyms, because what you're going to find in finance is those acronyms are thrown around all the time, and they just assume you know what they are. And if you don't, do yourself a simple little favor. And there's 1,000 blog posts out there that'll just give you everything you need to know. And they explain it like you're a moron like me. So there's that. All right. That's it. Casual conversation, folks. I told you it was going to be the marriage of money and marketing. 5 tips for a successful union. We brought in 2 veteran CMOs. One of them's good looking, and then one's me. His name is Mark Killens. He is the CMO of AirMeet. He has got a very accomplished pedigree. Check him out on LinkedIn. Mark, let's talk a little bit about AirMeet. For my audience who maybe have not heard of it, which would be staggering because since you've arrived, you have cranked up the brand like you wouldn't believe. What does AirMeet do, and why would these people want to sign up and become your customer?
Yeah, no, we love the partnership with Agora Pulse, with you, Daryl. Yeah, I mean, it's you folks have been a customer for a long, long time. Mike Alton,
Yep.
I love Mike. I mean, simply put, AirMeet, I'm going to do it in one sentence. This is how clean it can be. We help marketers book more meetings, get to pipeline faster, and help with customer engagement retention using premium webinars and events. That's it. Like, we were built to do those 3 things.
So the reason I love AirMeet, folks, why we're a customer, is because I dropped the expression. In fact, I had fun with it before I went on about event-led growth. I just Googled it, and of course, the number 1 hit is AirMeet. And event-led growth is really cool because of a lot of reasons. This is me speaking. I'm probably going to get it wrong. Mark's going to say that's not at all what it means. But it's the whole idea of the era of doing corporate LinkedIn pages and corporate press releases and corporate content. It's kind of like it's so gone. But what is big is the creator community and the whole idea of corporate creators and individuals. Mark's got a big following. I've got a reasonable following. I want to be Mark when I grow up someday. So I follow him all the time and like and comment everything he says. Hopefully he shows me some love. That's the way it works, right? Event-led. And event-led is usually it's a chance to get those corporate creators in front of your community, just like we're doing now. What we're doing here is an example of event-led. That's what AirMeet does. AirMeet has got some killer capabilities. We love it. Every single one of our, we use it for a variety. We use it for webinars. We use it for summits. And the summits are great because you can do breakout rooms and everything else. It's just like, I'm telling you, you guys are going to love it. If you're a big data person and what's going on with the performance behind the scenes, you're going to love it. So check out event-led growth, AirMeet for all your virtual events. That's that. I would be remiss. My team would yell at me if I didn't bring it back one last time because I have to pay for the bills related to this little venture we're doing here. And what they seem to think is they think people buying software from Agora Pulse is a good thing. What I will tell you is you don't need to buy Agora Pulse. We'd love it if you would, but what you do need to do is you need to be out there doing social media. And especially, there's never been a better marriage of those creator-led social media engagements, especially on your communities, especially with content hosted on the AirMeet platform. So if you want to know more, check out this ebook, Are Your Organic Social Media Efforts Paying Off? There's a link there for you. And best off, it's going to tell you how to measure it and be successful. So you can go back to your CFO and say, look at what we did. Life is great. And of course, I would be remiss to say, you know what? Just skip all that. Go see Agora Pulse in action. Here's a wonderful link for you. That's your infomercial. If you like this, we're going to send you a link. When you get that link, send it with every single person on your marketing team. Send it, share it in your marketing communities. The content discussed here today will change your marketing career. When that happens and you become a rock star marketer, don't forget Mark and I. Send us your money. We'd be grateful. In the meantime, that's Mark. I'm Daryl. And we'll talk to you soon. Have a good one, folks. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Cheers.